Okay, you guys, so we're gonna learn some Redux at this point. We've dove into some React, if you remember. We had to import it. The very first thing we did was use the command line, and we said create React app here and then the name of the folder. And then that gave us basically everything here. We called ours resume site. From there, inside of our source, we created a folders component, a graphics component, which right now just contains one image. From there, this index.js is what renders for us the app component, which is this one. And this, we told it to first render about. So, that was general React. Now we're going to add Redux. This adds a little bit more complexity, so this might actually take a little bit to wrap your head around. But we're going to start from the beginning. So very first off, I went ahead to this redux.js.org, and in here under the basics there is this actions, reducer, store, data flow, usage with React. We might read into a little bit more, but basically what I did is I copied all of these files over into here so we could get things running. So what this app does, it creates a to-do list. So wash dishes. Go ahead and enter that in. See it as we hit enter, it created that right here. We could mop the floor, clean garage, learn Redux. So here we have it, and then when we click on it, it actually creates a line through it, okay? We can show completed, we can show active, we can show all of them. So right now it's set to show all, and notice how that button, and that's just some display, but even as we add more, finish resume site, there we go. See, it still displays it that way, okay? So that's the basics of what this project does, but let's actually look at it, okay? I'm not too worried about the code. If you want that code and you want to try it out for yourself, you can come over to the redux.js.org, read through their documentation, basics, example to-do list, and basically you can look at all this code yourself as well if you need to. But here we go. So very first thing, as our package.json, when we start into this source folder with index.js, okay? So this, we have a few different requirements. We have an import from React, obviously. We need this React DOM for render. This provider, which is a React Redux. So that's new. We have create store from Redux itself. Root reducer, which is a reducer. Well, again, we'll get into all this, and then an app. Okay, so very first thing, let's go look at what a provider is. Let's go ahead and just search. Did that give us provider? It did not. Okay, fine. Redux, what is a provider? And here we go to the right place. Usage with React router, okay? So We're not too worried about installing it right here. But let's see. Provider. In our Redux app, we will still need provider. That didn't help us, did it? Let's go back. See if this helps us. I believe that's a video. How to use Redux's provider with React. Provider. Here we go. It's a React component given to us by the React Redux library. It serves just one purpose. Okay, just one. To provide the store to its child components, okay? Since the provider only makes the store accessible to its children, and we would ideally want our entire app to access the store, the most sensible thing to do would be to put our app component within the provider. Does that make sense? So all it does is it accesses the store, or gives the store to all of its children, okay? So in our example, we do the exact same thing as it said, most sensible thing. Give the app component to inside the provider, okay? So we wrap everything inside of this provider, which means that app itself is a child of provider. And so our app comes from component/app. So now inside of here we have the store, okay? Inside of here we have the store, which means that as it inherits down, add to-do list, visible to-do list, footer should also have the store, right? So if we were to follow the previous diagram, the provider node would be represented as a parent node on top of the app. However, because of the utility that provider gives us, I feel it's more appropriate to represent it as something which wraps the entire application tree like this. See? So the whole thing. From there, the next part of Redux that we need to know about is more or less a store or reducers, okay? So basically these reducers are our actions. They're telling us what to do. So we start with one single one. This combines them all, okay? We have to call this export default combine reducers, which is imported from Redux itself. And then we combine the to-dos and the visibility filter, which is this and this, okay? So what does this do? We get this const to-dos, and we switch on the action type. So it receives two things in here: a state, which is the previous state, it's immutable, and then an action. So we switch on that action. So if the action is add to do, we return all of this. Now this is important, okay? This is from ECMAScript 6 or ES6. ES6 ... Let's see if we can find it. Okay, ECMA, yes, 6. I just forgot the name of this. I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Spread. Okay, so here we go. Mozilla.org. Spread syntax allows an iterable, such as an array, expression, or string to be expanded in places where 0 or more arguments for function calls or elements for array literals are expected. Okay, what does that mean? Let's go to the examples. So here we go, XYZ function arg. So what happens here, we do the ... which is spread, and let's write it ourselves. Let's go over here. We'll just go ahead and comment out so that it doesn't ruin our code. But if we had an array, var equals an array 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then we say a equals, and I believe we need to do it inside ... 3. Well, let's do it. Sorry, I was on the wrong one. A equals function or my func dot a. Well, then we come over here, my func. What would happen is it would pass to B, C, D. Okay, so if we took 4 arguments like this, A would then equal 1, B would equal 2, C equals 3, D equals 4. The reason why, even though this is an array, normally if we passed just A itself, it would only go to this first value A. But because we're spreading it, it actually literally separates each one out. It spreads out an iterable, okay? So in this case, an array. It spreads it out and separates them into individual values. A little bit of a short on that. So basically state is an array of values, right? We spread it out. The reason why we're spreading it here is what happens is we don't want to mutate our state. All we want to do is add one more item at the end of it. So we spread this out, we do a comma, and one more item onto that array, which is this object item that has an ID, a text, and completed. Okay, this goes into our state when we return it. So that goes there, and that's what it returns, is this array. That's the array. Spread out the state, add one more item onto it. So typically if we didn't want to do this, when we work with arrays, we have an array push. So it's called push, or we have concat, okay? And I think we covered those a little bit. If we didn't, array push versus concat. Here we go. The push method adds one or more elements to the end of an array and returns the new length of the array. Concat is used to merge two or more arrays. This method does not change the existing array, but instead returns a new array. So basically the difference is they both accomplish the same thing in the end, but this push mutates the original array. Whereas concat keeps the original array immutable, which is what we want for our React, keeps it immutable. And then if after it does that, it adds a new array onto there. So instead of, so here's the examples. So instead of doing it this way, we could have said, let's go ahead and comment this out first. We could have said state.concat a new object id :action.id text action.text completed false. We could have done this and it would have accomplished the exact same thing. But we like this spread operator right here. It's a little easier to understand what's going on once you get the hang of this. Then you don't have to worry about the .concat and all of that. Okay, so if we do an add to do, this happens. Toggle to do. Okay, so this is literally toggling as it says. There's still a return, and then there's the state.map. So let's go look at what map does. JavaScript map. Using map on an iterator. We go back to the developer.mozilla.org. The initial value of the iterator property is the same function object as the initial value of the entries method. So map1 new map. Array or other iterable object whose elements are key value pairs. Okay, so there is a couple conditions on a map. Holds key value pairs, and basically what that means is this is a key, this is the value. This is the key, this is the value. So if we were to map this versus just a normal for loop, if we did a for loop on this, we'd have to then dive into this array one more level. Whereas if we map, it maps based off of this key to the value. The key equality is based on the same value zero algorithm. Objects are similar to maps in that both let you set keys to values. Map prototype. Let's see if we can get an example. Iterated using a for of loop. For of my map. We can look into these a little bit more, but I don't want to spend too much time. Just know that it's a key value pair. If you want to look into this, you can go ahead and start searching as well for that. Just know that it maps the to-do, state.map, the key, the value that we're going off of is this to-do. One to-do item is from the to-do list, right? And if the ID in the list is the same as that action ID, we toggle the completed, which is a Boolean, to true or false. Okay. If not, so again, we're spreading the to-do list, or that to-do item. Okay, we're spreading it out, and this completed value right here, we're switching it on that Boolean. So if we go back to our project, push is not defined. Oops. Let's go ahead and resave that, and hopefully reducers todos.js. Oh, there it is, my bad. There we go. So learn Redux. As we click on this, notice it crossed it out and uncrossed it. So we can say, oh yep, we're done. And then there's something else that got added that we forgot about. Oh no, we're not done yet. We need to learn a little bit more, right? So that's the toggling right here. And this is some basic JavaScript. So if you want to go over that, we want to mainly focus on the Redux itself. So reducers are basically, what they're doing is they're defining the actions and what to do on that action. Okay, so it's kind of like a function, or it is a function, basically, with certain cases in there. So one of the things we need to know is we have this actions list right here, right? Well, this is what's getting us each item. Where does that come in? Well, let's keep looking. App goes over to here. Do we have an actions here? Nope. No actions in any of these imported. I'm looking up here. Well, we are importing actions, the visibility filters right here in the footer, and then footer, none there, none there, none there, and I don't see any there either. So what about our containers? Yep, right here we import actions there. Not there, but we do have it also here. So what does that mean? So this is literally just defining specific types of how it's supposed to structure, okay? So it's just saying this action completes this. So if we really wanted, we could actually take this, and when we go into let's find it again, we want where it does add to do. No, we don't want there, we want add to do from actions, which is this add to do, right? So then when we read, and I don't know why it keeps moving on me, this add to do. So down here we should see a place where it says add to do. Do we? Well, there's an add to do here, but that's this one. We need to find the lowercase add to do, right? Oh, yep, it's right here. So if we wanted, we could comment out that line, and we would instead say dispatch all of this, and this text would actually be input.value, which is map to text, just like that. So that technically would work as well, and we might throw an error, it looks like. Unexpected comma on line 17, which is this comma. I couldn't tell you exactly why. We'd have to look into it a little bit more, but it doesn't like our comma, and I believe it's because this next to do ID is not defined here at all as a variable. But technically, if you could get this to work, okay, that's basically replacing it right there. So let's go ahead and remove all of that. Here we go, dispatch, add to do. So this dispatch keyword is actually pretty important. So let's go back here, Redux dispatch. Okay. A store holds, sorry, it decided to move down on me. Okay. Dispatch is an action. This is the only way to trigger a state change, okay? The store's reducing function will be called with the current get state, result, and the given action synchronously. Its return value will be considered the next state, and it will be returned from get state from now on. So basically what this means is we keep our state, and then we add the next iteration or the next level on the tree of the state. This way, as we follow the immutability, we can store states, and just like we did in the tic-tac-toe, we can time travel backwards to a previous state if need be. So if you attempt to call dispatch from inside the reducer, it will throw an error saying reducers may not dispatch actions. This is similar to cannot dispatch in a middle of a dispatch error in Flux. So basically that's all dispatch does, is it literally dispatches an action, okay? This is from the redux.js.org. So this is their documentation, exactly what they want you to know about it. So when we go back here, we say dispatch. This says dispatch an action. Well, the action is this add to do action, passing in an input dot value. And that comes back over to not to here first, but to this to-dos, because this actually contains our action. Notice how it takes two things, state and action, but all we do is pass it a value. So I'm sorry, that's the to-dos, the reducer. It uses this right here. It uses this add to do, and remember this is an arrow function. We don't need the parentheses around here, but we could add it if we wanted to. If we had more than one, we'd need the parentheses, but with just one parameter, we don't need it. So this is a parameter going in. This is the type, add to do, the ID, next to do, ID plus plus, and this text. This then goes down. First off, it comes through here, which is the combined reducers, and then it comes over to here. We have a state and an action. So as we go back, we didn't really give it a state. This is literally just the action that's being sent, right? So where does the state come from? Well, as we dispatch, it implicitly gives it this previous state and then the action. So we don't need to give it the state as we dispatch. Redux basically does that for us. So all we need to do is send it the action. It automatically gets sent the entire state already. And then we come back over. Here we go. It says, okay, return this, and then the state itself with this next item on there. Now this is a simple case. It can be more complicated, but more or less all you should have is this inside of your actions. Is it's gonna give the state and one more item on top of that state. You shouldn't really do anything more complicated. Notice this has a different case. It has two different returns, and that's only because this code is the it only has one return. So if we don't do an action that's add to do or toggle to do, it's just going to return itself. Okay, so if we added a different action, or we renamed this, or forgot an O or something here, it should still run, but as you can see, it doesn't do anything. The reason why is because of our default. It just returns the exact same as what it was. So we'd have to remember to have every case. And this has a different case, but that's basically what our reducers are doing. We have one that combines them all. Then these are separated. You could write these all into one, but you would still want to export a combine reducers, okay? Because this combine reducers is actually a function call to the Redux, telling it to basically register and listen for these actions. Okay, so even if we wrote it here, we would still want to combine them all in the end. Notice this has one const here, to-dos, and that also has one. So there we have it. That's our reducers. So again, going back, we go app, which goes to this app. We have three things in our div. We have the add to do, which is our container. We have a visible to-do list, which is also our container, and then a footer, which is in our component. And the reason why we have this footer not in a container is basically we don't need it. So these containers, as you notice, add to do, and put this, literally it has a form inside of it with two things in the form. It has an input and then it has a button. Okay. And that's the button that says add to do right here, and this is the input. So it's containing a couple different things, and this is more or less our pure component, or pure component. So this is an item inside of our container, right? So this is more or less like the giant list, or sorry, this one's the container of the giant list, right? That's why we import this to-do list, and this to-do list has the to-dos in it, and this is some basic React here. Notice we didn't import anything from Redux at all. This is telling it the type of properties, which is good to basically define. This is more or less like your model. So our model here tells us what a to-do item should have. Okay, so a to-do item has a list item. It has some type of text in it. It has the closing of the list item, right? Well, inside of here it has an onClick function, and it has some type of style. Well, the style's basically from the completed. Okay, this is a Boolean that comes through. So our prop types, if you notice, are onClick. It says that it has to be a function and it's required. Our completed is a Boolean, and our text is a string. If this wasn't a function, it'd be a little hard to do it. If this was just a string, it wouldn't do much, would it? So we have to define it as it's a function that's being passed in. And then this is a Boolean passed into the style. And then we get line through or none depending on what the Boolean is. And then our text. So that defines our model. Notice in to-do list, we also have a model. Okay, so this is exact same thing. It's a model. It's a model that has a model inside of it, but still think of it more like a model. So it has the unordered list right here. We map all of them, each to-do item. So to-dos, see that passes in an array. Then we map them as a to-do item. We map the key as the ID, and then we spread to do right here. And then we pass it also this onClick, right? So what that does is, notice it goes to this to do, which is the model. And some of this is just the React principles. OnClick, completed, text. Well, we have, right here. We have OnClick right here. And this is going to have completed and text inside of it, right? So we come back around to our reducer right here. Remember, it has an ID, text, and completed. So we come back over here. Oh, sorry, it went away again. We come back over here. ID, it has an ID, and then text and completed are right here. So it spreads the rest, right? OnClick does this function, so that sends ID, text and completed, the Boolean, and a function which is toggle to do. So that's how that works. So going back again, app creates each of these items. Remember, this is not a container, it's just a component itself. It doesn't need to contain any extra items. It's literally doesn't need anything else other than what it has here. And it does some fancy stuff, don't get me wrong. It does have this filter link inside of it. For what it, well, technically the filter link, yeah. As you can see, it wraps each one inside the filter link, and it passes these show completed, show active, show all. Visibility filters. And so that's how everything works. Redux is basically UI independent, and you can read that here. So let's start. I believe it's actually here. So they say from the very beginning, need to stress that Redux has no relation to React, okay? That's why, and actually I didn't tell you about the installs. We'll do that in a second. But from the very beginning, they want to stress that it has no relation to React. You can write it with Angular, with Ember, with jQuery, or just vanilla JavaScript as well. However, Redux works especially well with libraries like React and Deku because they let you describe the user interface as a function of state. Okay, if you remember, React is all based off of states. And then they also have the props, but it's based off of the state of a component. So what they want you to do when you combine it is you need to run this command, which was inside our command line, npm install -- save basically means that it's going to persist into your webpack or package.json file. I believe it goes and creates a node module here. Notice how many there are. This is because of the create React app. Does a lot of this for us, so we don't really have to worry too much about where everything is. Okay, but it's going to be in here somewhere. Don't worry about it. I don't want to have you too confused at all of that. But just know that it comes from inside the node modules, and we need to write that -- save React Redux. Okay, and we will do that on our other project really soon. Designing component hierarchy. This has nothing to do, well, this part does have to do with React itself. So let's go back and go to the core concepts. So imagine your app state is described as a plain object. For example, the state of a to-do app might look like this. It has this to-dos object, which contains, it's an array of objects, right? Text and completed, and then a visibility filter as well at the end. So this is one entire object. Inside that object, it has this array called to-dos. Then it also has this visibility filter right here, right? This object is like a model, except there are no setters. This is so that different parts of the code can't change the state arbitrarily, right? We don't want to change our state arbitrarily. So to change something in the state, you need to dispatch an action. Remember, we used the dispatch, and then we said which action. And an action is just a plain JavaScript object. Notice this is an action. Type add to do, go to swimming pool. This is a different action. Action type is toggle to do, and the index of which one to toggle. Set visibility filter is another action. So enforcing that every change is described as an action lets us have a clear understanding of what's going on in the app. If something changed, we know why it changed, right? So that's important. We want to know why something changed. Actions are like breadcrumbs of what has happened. And finally, to tie state and actions together, we write a function called a reducer, which was the reducers we wrote. This is basically the whole idea. And then right here we write another reducer that manages the complete state of our app by calling those two reducers for the corresponding state keys. Right there, that's our combined reducer basically. So there's three principles. The state of your whole application is stored in an object tree within a single store. Okay. Then state is read-only. The only way to change the state is to emit an action. So you can read the state, but you can't change the state. It's read-only unless you submit an action, and that action is what changes the state, which is, the object describing what happened. And then changes are made with pure functions. So a pure function is a function that returns exactly what the input was. So that's not to say that a function returns 1 if it received 1. it's to say that a function gets a number and returns a number, right? So in this case, our function gets the state and returns the state. So our function gets the state, also gets the action, but it returns the state. That's the only thing it returns is the state. It doesn't return anything added on to the state, it only returns the state. And yes, this is added on, but remember it's concatenated on, so it's part of the state now as well. Just the next layer in the tree. So if you need, there's some more learning resources here. There's quite a few of them. Redux is it's not too complicated once you use it a few times, but before you get there, it definitely can be complicated. And then the examples right here. So that's the basic principles. Now, here's our problem, right? Look at our app. We don't have actions, we don't have anything. So let's refactor our app. Before we do that, very first thing, I'm going to go ahead and stop running the one program. We're going to change to this resume site. Now, the reason I did this is we need to install two different things. Install -- save. Now we can just define them both right here. We need to get React -Redux. If you remember from the site, that's what it was telling us to get. And then the other thing we need, because we have not installed it from the Create React app, is Redux itself. Okay, so React Redux combines them together, but remember, Redux is independent, so it doesn't have to go with React. So we're installing both of these. While that happens, let's go back here. We don't need a lot of this, right? We are going to get rid of this register service worker, this logo SVG. We're going to get rid of the index, this app test, app.css. Now remember, we created this components, we created a graphics, we have app and index. We don't necessarily need both of these, but we're going to keep them. The reason why, let me get rid of these as well. The reason why we're going to keep both of them. This index.js gives us a few things. It renders our app right here, and then says document.getElement by ID the root. Where's that root? Well, it's down here in root. Okay, so this is actually what gets rendered right here, is this index.html page, and what we're doing is we're adding things onto this div itself. So we add app onto this root. And again, we could have done that here at the end, but we're okay. We're just going to leave it here. And we don't even need this register service worker. That don't have React index.css. We have React, React DOM, and app. That's all we really need here. Let's see, we should be done. Let's go ahead and npm start and make sure everything still runs before we change our file structure, right? Should still be loading, but it should load up very soon. Starting the development server, so we're still waiting on it. There we go. And remember, this is what we had. I'm sorry about last time, guys. My computer has a little bit of a glitch where everything just goes black for a second, and that apparently also stopped the recording from continuing. And I didn't want to just add a video with an extra, couple minutes. So this is what I created. Basically, a little bit about me, my skills, my education, relevant work experience. Okay. So that's what I have there. Let's go ahead and start changing. And what I'm going to do is put these side by side for us. So this is our resume site. We got rid of a lot of stuff that we didn't need. So let's go ahead. We're still in the source folder and start creating our file structure the same way. We have an index and an app.js. Notice this one doesn't have that. So let's do the same thing. We'll get rid of the app.js. We can go ahead and let's cut everything first out of there. Then we'll delete it. Before we do this, we're gonna just go ahead, comment out, and paste, right? So first we have React. We need to add a component from React, and then we need to add this import. And because we deleted app, we don't need that anymore, right? We'll go ahead and basically from there get rid of this line. Let's see what else we needed here. Well, we have React. We'll keep component just in case. We have the about, which is what we need. Import has a render and a provider and this create store and root reducer, okay? So we're going to go ahead and import render from React DOM, import provider from React Redux. Remember, we needed that provider to give the store to all of the children. Import root reducer from reducers. And we'll go ahead and do this import as well. App from components / app. And we'll get rid of this line. From here, we've done all of our imports, right? We're going to have a store, which is create store root reducer. And then we're going to do a render. We need to wrap this all inside of the provider and pass that store. Remember, now we're going to close the provider. That way we don't forget about it later, right? Inside of the provider. Let's put this on the next line so it's a little more readable. We're going to actually do this app just like we had before. We're still going to give it this app. Then we're going to do a comma, because what we need to do is we need to tell it to where to render to, and we are rendering it to this root. And then that should be all done. Well, we're definitely going to get an error because we don't have that app. And we don't have it, it's supposed to go here. So we're just going to follow this the same way. We already have a components folder. Let's go ahead and create a new file called app.js. Well, let's look inside of here. Right now we don't have anything, right? So we'll go ahead and add it in. Don't save that, we don't need it. So here we go. We don't need an add to do or visible to do or footer, right? What we do need though, what we haven't created, is we need a navbar. And then we also need inside of here the thing that's going to contain our about, our projects, etc., right? And so that's going to be called let's just call it main. And we don't need a footer. So we can get rid of this footer. However, we need navbar. This can literally just stay inside of our components. So we can do the relative path slash navbar. And then from here we also need main from containers slash main, just like that, okay? But what does that mean? Well, that means inside of here we also need to create a new folder called containers. Then in here we need a file called main. And then we also need to create this navbar inside of our components. So let's go ahead and create navbar.js. Now we haven't put anything in here yet, but we definitely have it. So if you remember from what we were going to do, we were going to create at the top a navigation bar that just has the about, the projects links, and then a contact. And then underneath we were going to actually have the about or the projects or links or whatever, okay? So we are going to have that navbar, and then we are going to have about, projects, etc. Containers comes from there, right? As we pull up our other project, this is a container, this is a container. So where do we need the reducers is the question. Well, first let's create a reducers folder. We don't need anything in there yet, but we'll have the folder. Our about doesn't really need a reducer, but our projects probably needs a reducer so we know which state or which project we're on, right? Because remember, this is basically our model. So we need a new file in here. We'll call it projects.js. And as we follow this reducer, we'd have a const projects. Remember, it gets two things. It gets a state and an action. From here, we have the arrow function, and then we'll also export defaults projects. Okay. From here, we have a switch case, action.type. I'm sorry, it's a colon. So we have a case. Nope, I was right. It is brackets and then a case with a colon. Now, switch project colon return dot for the spread state comma from here we need to give it our project ID, right? ID colon action.id. It's not called project ID, it's an action ID from our action up here. We're gonna now, and I believe that's all we need for our projects, right? We don't need much else other than an ID of the project, because the project itself is going to contain more. So that's going to switch our project. Make sure everything lines up. There we go. Export default projects. But we also need a default state, right? So this was here. And then we need defaults. Return state. Just like that. Just in case. We do want to always have a default. So there we go. We're not going to work on the navbar quite yet, but that adds our first reducer into here. What else do we need? Well, we need this main reducer, right? Index.js. Now, because we only have one, yeah, we could write it in here, but just for the sake of keeping things the same for when projects get a little more complex, let's keep it in this index.js. We're going to import the combine reducers from Redux, import to-dos from /to-dos, import visibility filter from visibility filter, export default combine reducers. It's an object, remember. Oh, and I'm sorry, we don't even need this. We need projects. Right now we'll only have one, but as we add more, we can just add them in here without worrying about adding it later. So if we needed to add another one for, you know, our links or our about page or whatever else, if we needed to add another reducer, we don't have to worry about doing this later and making sure we have everything like where it needs to be. This can literally just be exact same as here, where it has a defined function, and we export the function. And after that, it comes to here where we combine them together. So there we have it. That is our reducers in general. Container. For now, if we look, our code's probably still broken, right? Failed to compile. Expected corresponding JSX closer tag for provider. Oh, and you know why? It's because I misspelled. Not there, but here. If you caught that earlier, good job. Create store is not defined. There we go. Let's go back over to here. Looks the same to me. But did we miss something? We could have. Here's an issue right here. Was another spelling mistake. React DOM. I don't believe we need this. We just need that render. We have provider. I spelled that correct this time. Good job, me. We don't have create store, so of course I won't see it, right? Import create store from Redux. And there we have it. That should now work. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 imports on each project. So we are importing our React and the component from React. Again, I don't believe we need that. But we're just left it just because it's not hurting anything, right? We're importing the render from React DOM, which is this. And that's so if we undo, notice before we said React DOM.render. Well, if we just import render itself from React DOM, we can literally just say render. And there we have it. We didn't need the rest of the React DOM in this case, right? We just needed this render. So now let's see what we get. Element type is invalid. Expected a string for built-in components or a class function. Well, where is this? Check the render method of app. Did we save? Yeah, we saved. But it's telling us to check the render method of app. Well, let's look at our app on the other project, right? Components, app. Put it inside the div. We got there. Have our container, our navbar. It's probably that we're not rendering these. So let's get that done and taken care of really fast. So let's look at what it does, right? Let's go to our add to do. Notice this has a return, so we want the same thing inside of our main. So containers main, nothing we've written yet, right? Import React from React, import connect from React Redux, and import because this is our main, we want to import projects from /actions. Now we haven't created this either, have we? We have an actions folder. Says we're importing. Let's go ahead and create a new folder called actions. Notice inside of here we just have an index.js file, index.js. Here's our actions. And this is why, by the way, see we had this next to do ID previously, why this broke on us last time. Anyways, back to what we actually need to do. Export const switch project equals so let's see, type switch project ID, and it's going to be our next project ID, and above that, of course, we need to have this let next project ID equals 0. That's going to be our index array, right? Just for now, and we don't have any projects, so I'm not going to worry about too much of what's going to happen here, but we need a way to cycle through our projects, not just add to them, right? So we might want to put it in here, but for now we have the basics and we won't worry too much about it. So that goes there, this comes here. So back to our main.js, which was our to-do list, right? It actually should be this to-do list. React, we need prop types. We'll go ahead and comment those out for now. Import prop types from prop types. And import to do from, we don't need this to do we? But for now we want to render about from, and we're actually in here, and we need to go back to the components. So to do that, we go up one, go down to components, / about. Okay. And then we have a const main equals, so that we can pass states and all that. for now, we are going to go about and switch project. We're not going to use most of this for now. And we'll go ahead and just add it right here. And even this, let's get rid of it for now. We just want to render this. Export defaults main. Let's see what happens now. Element is type is invalid, expect a string. That's still on this render method. And that's probably because we haven't done our navbar, right? So remember, we're doing main and navbar in here. So navbar is kind of like our filter. So we'll go ahead and import React from React. Import our, we don't even need that. We do want to import. We should be good with just that for now. I'm not too worried about what we're displaying. Const navbar equals and then we're just going to have a div, and inside of here we are going to have for now a link. href equals slash about. Close that. href equals slash projects. Close that. Equals links. Close that. And the last one, which we're doing inside of a span, which I believe we had links, contacts. Nope, okay, we're still good. I just wanted to make sure, which is going to be href equals slash contact. And then the last thing, we need to export default navbar. Well, now let's see what happens. We might still get the same thing. Let's find out. Navbar.js, unterminated JSX contents on line 9. Line 9. So it doesn't like this div for some reason. A div, we close the div. Links here, same as what they do here, right? And then we export defaults navbar. com. We open the div. Let's go ahead and try this first. Let's comment all of that out so we can find out where our issue lies. Still line 9. So we know it's none of the in-between code. It's something to do with the div. Let's go ahead and do this really fast. I'm going to comment out all of this. Navbar. We don't need anything in there for it. Let's see what happens when we do that, because it should be the same, right? It actually shows up. So I'm not too sure what we missed. Equal sign, parentheses, arrow function, parenthesis, close the parenthesis there. We open div, right? And we closed div right there. And then close the parenthesis. Just for experiment's sake, before we end, because this is the last thing, we got everything displaying again, right? Let's go ahead and put that back in. It really does not like it. Let's copy this over. Paste there, but with a close, save. Oh, a span. There we go. Now if we put this back in, which notice before, unfortunately, comments do not work so well here, do they? So even when I commented this all out and we save, notice it still shows up just with a slash before it all. And then it still does the rest. So just so you're aware, comments don't work. And that's why it was still breaking, is I didn't close my span afterwards. Remember I covered that in some earlier, make sure you close your tags. It still happens. To everyone it does happen. So there you have it. I want to end there. We got everything displaying exactly the same. We just changed our setup here, where now we have a few more folders. We have an actions, we have components still. We put our app inside the components instead. We added a navbar here. We have our about component. That's the only one we've really filled out. We have a container for main, and this right now only has about in it. And then our app itself has the navbar and the main. We'll be able to style this a little bit later, but now once we switch what's inside of our main, when we change this from about to projects or whatever else, it will still show up. So this is our main screen, literally, and the navbar is just like our header. That way when we change components, we still have this main component, and we get rid of about and we put in project. It's right there, type dill. So we're gonna end there. Next time we will try and add. Let's first add our tic-tac-toe project to make sure that works, and then we will start working on a more complex project. But let's get one project added so we can see it on our projects, and join me next time.